Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the IAP2 Canada informational webinar on the special elections we have coming up for our international representatives. So this is Anne Harding calling, or I guess online, coming to you from Treaty 7 territory in Southern Alberta. I'll be your moderator for today and staff support from IAP2 Canada. We have a few panelists with us on the line as well who have experience to share about serving on the international board. But we also know that this is a bit of a conversation and learning for you. So we have a little bit of a formal part at the beginning, maybe for 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. But then we want to really throw it to a question and answer conversation opportunity so that people who are considering putting their names forward for the international board can really get the information that they're looking for out of this. As I think we know, the webinar is being recorded, and so people who weren't able to make it today but are still considering putting their names forward are able to view this after the fact. So welcome to folks who may be joining us after as well, and thanks so much for your interest. A note about the webinar software. So we have a few opportunities for you to engage. You'll be in listen only mode, or your microphones are muted to start with so that we can minimize background noise. You are free to take yourselves off of mute if you want to jump in and ask a question. We also have a few other options as well. You can raise your hand. I believe there's a hand icon there if you want to jump in. Or you can type a question in the question box as well, or in chat to everybody. So a few options there to engage when we do open it up. Really, it's fine to have everybody's mics sort of off so that you can jump in and have that dynamic conversation. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll dive right in. So a little bit of background about the international elections. So the IAP2 was founded in 1990. So we've been the professional association for public participation professionals for a number of decades now. And the foundational background was really to respond to that rising global interest in P2. And our mission has always been to promote good practice, really to promote the practice of P2 and involving those members of the public in decisions that affect them. And that is very much still the core of our organization. There have been a few different changes along the way to governance structure of IAP2. The more recent one being in 2009 and 2010, when we transitioned from an international body with regional chapters. So for example, the Wild Rose chapter here in Alberta, where I'm based, has been around since the 1990s of IAP2 and for a while was a part of the international body. Then in 2010, we made a change to become a federation of affiliates. And so there was an international board that was a federation, and different countries became affiliates of that. So IAP2 Canada was actually born in 2010. And since then, we've been managing through those regional dynamics. We've established, at least in Canada, chapters that sort of in the hierarchy fall under IAP2 Canada, and really serve that local need for events and professional development at the chapter level. IAP2 Canada has purview over the activities happening within the country. There's also affiliates, what would have been called affiliates in IAP2 USA, and then we have a number as well around the world. So Australasia is an affiliate, making up Australia and New Zealand. We have a Southern Africa affiliate, Indonesian affiliate as well, and certainly our international reps can correct me with the other folks who I'm missing as well on the line. Over the last number of years, there have been ongoing conversations about the right operating and governance model for this organization, and so where we've come to, and there might be reference that you've heard to the change initiative, and so that's sort of a capital C, big change that's been happening. And so what we're working now is to transition to a governance model where Our countries are regions, so Canada will be a region, and there will be an international body that it's not quite the same hierarchy that we had in that federation of affiliates, but really where international has a very specific purpose to serve international interests of the organization. And so rather than that hierarchy, it's sort of as I understand it, to be an additional body alongside regions, but with a very specific purpose. And so to that end, that new body that comes into effect January 1st, 2020, requires a board. And so given that the intention of that organization is not that they are in the hierarchy to represent interests of specific regions, they are representing the interests of that organization, the international body of IAP2. And so we're electing representatives from our broader membership to really govern that body with that international focus. So that's the high level explanation that I'm able to provide based on my understanding, although I'm sure we'll get additional highlight as well from our panelists. A focus on being on the international board. So this is sort of a current snapshot, but very much we recognize that when the new board comes together January 1st, there's likely to be additional calls as well to determine how that new board will work together. What we do know is that Canada has 2 representatives to put forward, 2 members from Canada, I should say, that will serve on that international board. The US and Australasia will also have 2 members on that board, and then the emerging regions, which we can see here. So I missed Italy and eventually Latin America as well, to share that responsibility on the board with staggered terms. And so what we have in front of us is the opportunity to elect members for a 1-year term and a 2-year term, one each respectively from our Canadian membership here. Board meetings currently happen virtually through Zoom, and there's sort of an understanding that they don't get scheduled between midnight and 5 a.m. in any time zone. And knowing that we are globally operating in different time zones around the world, that can sometimes make for some pretty early mornings or some pretty late nights. So just recognizing that that's part of the international board experience as well. And I'm sure our panelists can share a bit more about their experience. And so I'm gonna go through and invite each of them to introduce themselves, to talk about when they've been on the international board or the federation board, maybe a bit about the activities or committees that they were involved with. And then, so we'll go through everybody with that overview, and then maybe dig into a bit more of a Q&A. So we'll start off with Sarah. So Sarah Reveille, if you could provide a bit of an introduction to yourself and your experience with the international board.
Hi, thanks for that introduction, Anne. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. I was one of the international reps from, let me think about this, March 2018 until September 2018. And it was a really wonderful experience for me. I learned a lot about international governance. I'm really interested in IAP2 Canada's governance. So what I ended up doing when I was on the international board was actually getting involved in the governance side of things, and that's since carried over. Now I sit on one of the legal and governance committees, currently helping with this change process and some of the legalese behind it. But was a really wonderful experience. I attended one of the board meetings that was in Durban, South Africa, which was fascinating to be there and meet other representatives from around the world. And then we met in Victoria just prior to the North American or after the North American conference in 2018, and was a really wonderful time. But happy to answer questions. I'm in Eastern time zone, and I think the meetings for me were at 11 p.m. once, and then I think 6 or 7 a.m. once. So they are definitely on those really far sides of of the time for sure, but was well worth attending and was very interesting.
That's great. Thank you very much there, and apologies for my phone interruption there. So we'll move over now to Bruce. If you can introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can now, thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bruce Gilbert. I live in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I've been the Federation rep for the Canadian board, one of two reps for just over 2 years. My arrival in that position is kind of, well, it's interesting and somewhat unusual. I joined the Canadian board in the spring of 2015, became the Canadian president. And as I was cruising into my last year of my, year of my 3-year term, I stepped forward to be a Federation rep. And my term as president ended, and I then became a member of the board for my second third-year term. I'm in my second year now, I believe. And so for the past 2 years, I've been sitting on the Federation board. What's interesting for me in particular is that at one point I was a Canadian president and on the Federation board, and it was a handful. So if I had any advice for people, it would be to clear your deck a little bit, because being a Federation board rep, whether you're in the old model or the new model, I can't see it getting any lighter in the new model. It's a working board, and people are expected to do things, and each individual brings their skills to the team, and of course it would be great if we could orchestrate the Federation board of the future to have a nice blend of skills, but that's a little bit difficult when everybody's sending their rep or reps via a democratic process. So basically you work with the team you end up with. It's a very ambitious organization, very complicated organization, multi-pronged, a lot going on. It took me a while to get up to speed, and I guess my big piece of advice is get stuck in early, find something to work on. I myself ended up working, myself and Sarah and Katherine all arrived in the middle of a pretty enormous change process. So that became the work, and we were all stuck into that. I'll just say that there were so many different ways to become involved. I myself got involved with an advocacy and emerging practice stream, and in particular, I ended up working with a team from around the world at really odd hours, people from Indonesia and Australia and New Zealand and India, to develop a bit of a research strategy for the Federation that the new board will inherit. And I've also worked more recently with the Federation board on things like developing a dispute resolution process, and also we're doing a bit of an inside diversity and inclusion study to try and ensure that our organization is more diversity suitable. And so all of these things are work. Lots of work needs doing. A lot of really good people. I've always felt welcome. It was a good experience, and but it was hard work. There, how about that for now?
That's good for now. Thanks a lot, Bruce. And so, Katherine, we'll go over to you here. Hello.
Hi. So thank you to everyone who's joining us and showing an interest in being on the International Board. I live in the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, and that's in the Pacific time zone. I say that because my experience of being on the board was that the meetings are generally about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So 80% of them were at 4:30 in the morning. and went till about 6:30, or they were at 11 o'clock at night and went till 1 in the morning. So depending on your time zone and what you prefer, be prepared for a lot of early mornings and evenings. But that being said, there was a lot of, first of all, the people are really fantastic. They are great to work with. I have been on the International Board for a year, since September 2018. Besides being on the board and attending those monthly board meetings, I also, as part of the change process, chaired the marketing, or co-chaired, I should say, the marketing and brand committee with Kathy Smith, who is currently the US president of IAP2. And we did a lot of work engaging with different members of that task force around what would marketing and what were the implications for the brand. Also, I was involved on a committee that was related to the advocacy committee that Bruce is talking about, specifically looking at the last meeting that we had in Bangkok, Thailand, that was aligned with a international forum that IAP2 co-presented with the UN. And in that, I was involved in organizing it, so there were quite a few extra meetings and looking at the curriculum or the content of the agenda, and then facilitating many of the meetings. I tapped into Bruce's expertise as a facilitator as well, and he led some of the meetings. So, you know, I don't want to repeat all the things that Bruce has said in terms of the type of work, but it's a very rewarding experience. You get to meet people from all over the world and really learn about their cultures and about how they do things, about diversity of public engagement experiences and strategies. For that reason, it was exceptionally rewarding. And as it moves forward, I think that the current board has really set the new board up for success. There's a lot of infrastructure that's been created, and you will have kind of a foundation on which to draw on as well. One of the things I will say that helped me as I came on, as Bruce said, there's a lot of information and it's a very complex organization, but it has a very good website that allows you to download all of the different background materials, look at the history, understand the complexity. And it has great staff that provide support. So as a volunteer, you're not on your own. Ellen organizes all the meetings, gets it all organized for us, connects people, shares resources. So for that reason, you also feel very well supported. And so that is the kind of the high level overview that I would provide at this point.
Thanks so much, Katherine. And I'll share as well. So I had the pleasure of serving on the Federation board in 2013 or so. So a while ago now, and similar to the experiences that have been shared, it was just a wonderfully rich opportunity to connect with individuals around the world with a similar passion for good P2. And some of the initiatives that I had been involved with was on the hiring. So we do have, there is excellent staff support. So some of those opportunities for what's the right staff support for this international body and who is the right candidate for that. So I had been involved in some of that work, as well as a review of IAP2's, one of IAP2's programs at the time was how trainers were licensed to deliver the IAP2 courses. So I was involved in the review of that program and establishment of outcomes for future programs. So just a couple of other pieces of work that might pop up along the way. I had one question to pose, and Katherine, thank you for answering it, just if there is staff support and raising that. One question that's come up that somebody's asked as well is reflecting that it sounds like there's been some in-person travel. So Sarah talked about that, and Katherine, you had as well. And so I'm curious, in the for future boards, is there an expectation as well that there would be in-person travel from representatives. And not too sure who to throw that to, if anybody, Katherine, Bruce, or Sarah have that answer.
Well, I think Bruce and I can probably both speak to this. I mean, it's likely that there may be some travel, although the conversation, you know, while it used to be that, you know, they had 1 or 2 meetings a year that they traveled, then I'm not sure that moving forward that, you know, they're going to do that as often. Bruce, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, it seems to me that one of the spin-off impacts of the new structure is that the Federation is probably firstly going to have fewer resources to work with. So there have been a number of discussions at the table about getting together and face-to-face meetings. I think everybody believes that there needs to be some face-to-face possibilities with a board of this size and with this level of volunteer commitment, because otherwise it's just people on screens forever and on late night phone calls. But it's not clear. I think if I was a betting person, I would imagine that the idea that people would meet twice a year might turn out to be a once a year opportunity. I'm not sure about that, but that would be my guess. Less international travel, if for no other reason, less money. Now, at the same time, there may be sub projects that are really going to require you know, detailed and intense work. So who knows? Maybe there'll be some clusters of people get together face to face in certain regions for certain purposes. I don't know. I can't say, but I think there'll be less travel. Sound right, Katherine?
Yes, I think there will be less travel, and the new board may decide that that they do have some kind of meeting. The only one I can remember that they actually talked about potentially linking into was the North American Conference, if people are going to that. And that's where one of the meetings has been. So it could be that they still continue to do that. I'm not sure.
Thanks so much. Another question that's come through. So if someone is elected without that international experience, just would past Canadian representatives, so the folks on this line, be available to support with for somebody to ask questions to or seek guidance from?
Well, of course.
Katherine, I would think so, but let's just be clear about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is Katherine, and I'm on the Canadian board, currently serving as vice president. And if any of our members reach out and they want to know about the international board, or they want to know something that's going on with IAP2 Canada, I make myself available. So certainly, if you know, in that, not only in that transition time, but moving forward, if there's something that people are have a question about, or yeah, just send an email or call, and I'll do my best to support based on what I know.
That's great. Thanks so much. And Sarah, how about you?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that I forgot to say, my experience on the international board was what inspired me to put my name forward to go for president of IAP2 Canada. And Bruce is excellent presidency as well. Both of those things certainly helped. But as leaders of IAP2 Canada, absolutely, we're here as a resource for new folk coming in. Whatever we can be of help with, anytime, anywhere, absolutely thrilled to help. And I mean, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of online resources to information, but for some folks, if it's easier to talk or meet up, we can make, you know, if we live in the same city or the same area, we can absolutely make it happen.
That's great, Sarah. And I think I'm gonna play off this a little bit, because I think it's an interesting point of discussion, and I don't know that we've necessarily had this yet, and or that we know the answer. But since there has, at least for the last almost 10 years, been a formal connection between IAP2 Canada and the Federation or the international body, because the person on the board had to be on both boards. This is kind of a new world, new territory where there isn't that formal connection between the regional organization and board and the international body. And so I'm curious for all three of you, sort of your thoughts on how that might work for somebody coming in who doesn't have that formal connection to IAP2 Canada, but would there be a desire for formalized sort of quarterly meetings or ways of information sharing so that context for both decision-making parties can, I guess, be retained?
Good question.
That is a really good question. I was just sitting here thinking about that. And Sarah, Sarah and I are kind of the dynamic duo here, president, vice president. I can speak for myself and say that I think it would be valuable to, for the board, IAP2 Canada's board, to, whether it's an email update or it's joining our, quarterly or whatever it is, a conference call with the board with an update, I think would be valuable. I would like to know what's going on internationally if I'm no longer on the board, because it may have implications for our Canadian members.
I can add a little something there, if I may. One of the differences between the past and the imminent future is that we were really reps of the board, and we would come back from meetings and basically move things through the board, get the board's feedback on things. The board would grill us with questions of, about what's happening at the federation level, especially in the change process. The new model, the two reps aren't there. Now they might be there for 1 year, because there is a little technical nuance that board members shouldn't be board members of Canada and also on the Federation, except for the first year, aka the transition year, which might not be a bad thing if it happens to work out that way. But the thing I want to say is that there's now this thing called the President's Council, and basically what that is that the presidents of all the regions, so in this case it would be Sarah, would meet with all the other presidents via technology with the chair of the Federation, and maybe others, I don't know, to get updated and know what's going on. So now it'll be Sarah bringing the bacon home to the board about what's going on at the Federation level. But I think it would be in Sarah's best interest to invite ex officio to various Canada board meetings from time to time the Canadian elected reps to the board, so that there's more information going two ways. I think that would be a good thing. It might be a bit awkward if somebody had never had any experience with IAP2 before in any form to become a Federation rep. But hey, we're all very malleable people, and smart people get up to speed quickly. And you could also argue that there'll be some fresh face, fresh perspective benefits of such a thing. And I'll just note that I had never been a member of IAP2 Canada before, and I joined and became president quite by accident. And I survived. And I don't know if I was the best president, but I don't think it's a complete hindrance that you might be, if there's people out there on the call that are new and fresh to the IAP2 organization.
The one thing I'll add to this as well is that it's all new. I mean, when you're joining any organization as a board member, you're representing the members' interests. So as much as everyone on this call, the panelists, I'll say Bruce and Katherine and I, can be a resource, you're representing the members of IAP2 Canada. So, trust in yourself that you have the information and the smarts, and by the election happening, the members have chosen you, this person, to be the representative. So you have that fire within you. Go forth. you can do it. And we are here for you. But yeah, I do think that it'll be nice to have the support of the board, like to keep involved. And I'll say, as the Canadian board, we've definitely felt more connected with what's happening at an international level when the reps have reported back and given information and updates, and not just, oh, everything is good, everything's moving along, everything's fine. So the more engaged the representative is, the more information that's shared with members and with the board, the better it may be for all of us.
That's great. Thank you, guys. So a question now for Bruce and Katherine is about this transition. So recognizing that we're heading into a year of transition for sure. And the question is around if the current board has prepared sort of a transition plan or laid out what that transition year might look like for the people bringing it on in January.
You want to go, Katherine?
I thought you were going to go first because I saw your picture up there. Well, I think the first thing that's going to happen in January is you're going to actually look at the documents that we've created in terms of there's kind of a placeholder strategic plan with a number of strategic priorities. I think the board will be looking at all those things to see if there's a general consensus on all the directions and items that the past board has identified, and you'll be working through that. I'm trying to think of the other things. Bruce, let's do this together. I'm trying to think of the other things that are, there's a number of decisions coming up in terms of all of these different committees that are still putting recommendations forward. I think about, there's a couple things from advocacy, there's research, there's these large task forces. I imagine that those things are that work's going to continue in the new year.
Totally. If I was a new board member, if I'm on the board again, for instance, the first thing I would do is pick up the work from the last group and say, okay, let's benefit from their efforts and keep going with the pieces that we can manage. If I was a new person on the board, I would do the same thing, because a lot of very, very experienced people have weighed in to get the ship prepared as well as it can be, ready for the next crew. And some of the crew will be the same. And there's a bunch of things that aren't right with the ship. There's some leaks over here and some planking that hasn't been put in place, and there's no compass. Okay, that maybe not the best metaphor, the compass part. There is a direction. There's so much work to be done. I think what was the word you used, Katherine? It's like a proposed strat plan for the new board. Here's what we would do if we were you. Good luck. Don't feel bound by it. And the board will move forward on some things, and some things are more critical than others. I mean, there's legal implications of some pieces of work. There's contracts that have to be written. On the dispute resolution piece, for instance, I co-led the committee that developed a dispute resolution mechanism and a package of materials that basically its main recommendation is more work is needed. We need a toolkit for various players out there in our family about how to resolve disputes amicably without getting high-paid lawyers involved. So let's get to work on that. So there's a bunch of precise and broad proposals there. People will pick it up and run with it. There'll be lots to do. And then I think as the new board gets its feet sort of firmly positioned on the ground, there'll also be all kinds of new possibilities coming through. For instance, emerging practice is a placeholder term for every other region or sub-region in the world that might be interested in becoming part of this IAP2 family ecosystem, but there's nothing known about any of those, so that has to be built. So there's some guidance and a lot of room for creativity. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to add a couple things that you said, Bruce, that struck me. One is that, first of all, there's still even though there's a new international board being elected, there's still quite a breadth of committees, and there are people that are on those committees that will continue to work on those committees, and those people have a lot of experience, and they are in all the areas that Bruce talked about. The other thing is that IAP2, for example, Bruce mentioned the diversity audit. He mentioned a number of different committee works that are going on. IAP2 International is hiring or has hired contractors to do some of that work. The change process was and has been and continues to be stealthily managed by a group of consultants out of Newfoundland, I believe. And they have been supporting the international group and doing a lot of the framing and preparing the documents. So while you're providing that direction and input as a board member, you're not doing it alone or in isolation. You're going to have the support of these various committees, and as well, IAP2 International has hired different consultants and will continue to do so. There's an RFP out right now on that diversity audit, and there'll be probably some different RFPs coming out in terms of the brand analysis and some different things that are going to come forward. And those decisions will come forward to the board. And so you'll actually weigh that, and you can reach out to myself or Bruce or any of the other international board members to find out what the history is, to understand the context for that decision, because I think that'll be one of the biggest challenges. And it's one of the ones I found when I came in, was that understanding the context. How did we get here to this place where this decision is coming before me, in terms of whether it's financial implications, or it's a program, or it's approving an emerging affiliate, for example, in Latin America, and what are the different elements that we need to really consider to make a fulsome decision on this. So there's some complexity, as Bruce mentioned previously, but there's a lot of resources as well to draw on. You're not alone.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to open it up and just ask, I know folks have been typing in the chat and offering questions, and thank you very much for that. Is there anybody who wanted to raise your hand or have your mic opened up to be able to ask a question or add comments directly? Okay, not seeing any. I think I'll move to sort of a bit of a closed type of question and go back, I guess, to Sarah, Bruce, and Katherine, and just ask what advice you have to those who might be considering putting their name forward for nomination. Sarah?
So, like I said before, my time, although it was short on the international board, I was just an interim rep as somebody had to step down. So I was just doing a limited term. It inspired me to be a better leader, and it inspired me to step up at IAP2 Canada. So if you're interested in leading and you see this as something that would be something that you're interested in, I absolutely encourage you to step forward and to look into it. You're representing the members of IAP2 Canada, over 700 of them. And members are very passionate about P2 and about the organization, about training, about our strategic plan. So it's an exciting time to get involved where there is lots of change, and there might be some learnings that come with it as well, but I'm excited for who the new reps or continuing reps will be and the journey forward.
Thanks, Sarah. Bruce, advice?
Okay, I won't repeat myself. Hopefully, I did say some things early on. I think it's important to take one's place early. If you get on the board, take your place. It would be easy to hide on the board, I think. It would be easy to hide away and participate in the regular stuff. But if you're there and given up your time and went through all the trouble to kind of get on the board, you probably should just, get stuck in find something, say, yeah, I'd like to help with that, and get involved quickly, because then you'll feel rewarded. And I did feel early on, you know, and we all have this imposter syndrome from time to time. I did feel early on, like, why am I here? How did I get here? I shouldn't be here. Everybody knows everything. Well, what they really had was the history, and I got caught up. My other piece of advice would be, you know, it is an international board dealing with an organization that deals with public participation, P2. But, you know, my experience is that the role is more about a group of people helping govern, fix, manage, steer, shepherd a complicated organization through perpetually rough waters. So it would help if you were interested in the dry, boring work of organizational management, if you know what I mean, governance. It's a lot about that. It's not like we're not all at once we went to the UN and facilitated some workshops, which is kind of probably why we're all involved with IAP2. We love that kind of work, and it's our background. But the role on the board is a lot of, you know, it's a lot of dry, behind the scenes. It's what most boards of directors do. It's not all that exciting sometimes, but it's rewarding just the same. It would help if you have an interest in it.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. And Katherine, advice for somebody considering nomination?
Well, I'm not going to repeat what Bruce said. I agree with, you know, everything that's been said. I think if I had some advice, it would be that, you know, you're coming to this from the Canadian perspective, even though you're not, you know, you're on the international board, but we as Canadians bring a certain type of lens to all of our work, and we're known internationally, and people have a lot of perceptions about Canada. And, you know, it's interesting as you get to know and you work with people, whether it's in our Australasia, or it's in Europe, or it's in Indonesia, or it's in the US. Each of all those people bring their own cultural perspectives, and you learn a lot about the strengths and the weaknesses, or the gaps, or whatever you want to call it, to P2 in general. But as Bruce said, the work of this organization and the work that you'll be doing, so there's that side, you learn that, but the other side is you're actually providing strategic advice to the organization to balance competing interests and to do the day-to-day work that's involved in governing a large-scale organization. And that involves managing competing priorities, looking at competing resources or access to resources, whether that's people or money or all the different resources. So keeping that high level perspective and finding out what you really love to do and volunteering to do it, and not feeling bad for saying no, or saying, you know, this is what I have the capacity to do right now. And as Bruce said, carve out that path forward for yourself.
That's wonderful. Thank you guys very much. So just as we're closing here, noting the next steps for the election process. So here we are with our webinar today, and the recording of this will be made available on our YouTube page and then on our website as well for anybody else considering who wasn't able to join us. Nominations close on November 13th. So the information is on the website for the application, the form to fill out. We are also offering the opportunity for nominees to create a short video of yourself to share why you want to be part of the international board and what you're interested in bringing. And so those videos will be available as part of your information package should you choose to create one, as people are considering who to vote for when the voting begins November 20th. and we'll have that open for a couple of weeks as well. If you do have any questions about anything in this process, there's a link to Anita's information on the website, or it's volunteer at IAP2Canada.ca to ask more about this process. So thank you very much for joining. I'll just make one last call to see if there's any other burning questions or comments that folks wanted to share. Okay, thank you very much for joining, and we hope this has provided you with the information that you were looking for, and we look forward to receiving your nomination. Take care, everyone, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks.